Welcome to Scrolling to Death. I'm Nikki, and today I'm joined by Alex Fraser, Director of the Council for Responsible Social Media at Issue One. And in this role, Alex leads the cross-partisan council of political, civic, public health, business, and national security leaders working to address the threats that social media platforms pose to American society. So Alex, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Nikki. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So let me first admit to you, Alex, I worked on the wrong side of social media for over 10 years. So I ran a social media management company for tech businesses around the globe. And a few years into that, I started having kids and posting my kids, and like most moms, spending way too much time and getting way too much value from social media. So probably around 2018, 19, that veil started to lift, and I realized that personally, social media was making me feel worse, and I was exposing my kids' lives on there. Like, for what? Is it benefiting them? I started asking myself all kinds of questions. And worst of all, I was making a ton of money, manipulating other people's decisions through social media content and ads. And so I started doing research on how social media addiction works, and I found the staggering rates of depression and suicide in the people who use social media the most, which is our youth. And so, long story short, I felt compelled to flip the script in my own life and move to the right side of social media and educate parents and adolescents on the dangers so that we can all protect our children's mental health. So that led to this podcast. And I start with my story today because I think it's so interesting to learn how people got to be involved in a space that is the minority and can be an isolating space to be, and can feel like you're the only one that thinks this way. So I would love to learn that. What brought you to work in digital advocacy?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the question. And again, thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you for having that epiphany, because I
Thank
think
you.
a lot of people go through life and know something's wrong, feel like something's off,
Mm-hmm.
don't get it, and don't take that next step to do the critical thinking and go deeper and then try to actually make a change in the world.
Yeah.
So for me, the story of how I ended up in this space begins with a bigger issue of democracy. And
Mm-hmm.
my previous life and careers, I've worked on international affairs and international democracy around the world. I worked at the State Department for a long time trying to help U.S. Ensure that democracy was a stable system around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I left that in 2017, went and worked in education policy and politics out here in California for a long time, trying to help
Mm-hmm.
our kids find better education. And then saw our own democracy falling into disarray in a way that I observed a lot of the other countries that I worked on for many years. And I said, I got to get back into that, and I got to
Mm-hmm.
find a way to use the skills and the knowledge that I've gained over these years to try to find a way to make an impact on American democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But where to start, what to focus on, what to do. Did a lot of research, a lot of thinking, and one of the core issues that I was most concerned with was the information ecosystem and
Mm-hmm.
disinformation, the ways in which our information environment is exploited, and that led me down a deeper and deeper stream of information about all the things that are happening in tech, and really just unpacking that further. So from that, I did a lot of networking and reaching out to folks in this space, and found my way to Issue One, which was about to launch this new program about tech
Mm-hmm.
reform and accountability, which started with the impacts of this space on democracy, but quickly we realized was much bigger than that. We had to focus much more broadly, and the impact of children was front and center to all that, which has, for me as a parent, I have two young, beautiful daughters. So this is obviously central to my heart as it is to yours.
Mm-hmm.
But the impacts on our kids are also really, there's major implications for the future of democracy as well.
Yeah. So I was reading on the website for the Council of Responsible Social Media. It states, so social media promised to build a more interconnected and informed world, but now the harms the platforms are causing are exceeding the promise of greater improved conversation and global connectedness, and American democracy is at stake. So can you tell me what, in your view, are the biggest harms of social media that parents need to be aware of their kids getting exposed to?
Yeah, absolutely. So for kids, so you're sitting next to your child, they're looking down at this screen.
Mm-hmm.
They're going into these worlds, these rabbit holes, these other parallel universes. You have no idea where they're going, right? And it's hard to understand it. And when you hear the worst examples of people who lost their children to this stuff, you understand where this can go in the extreme. So one is they get fed a lot of terrible content based on algorithmic recommendations, based on frequently little or no choices of their own. There are plenty of studies out there that talk about people starting brand new accounts as a 13-year-old girl. That's a fake account to see what's fed to them, and after limited clicks on something benign, quickly eating disorder content shows up, self-harm content shows up, and all kinds of other terrible stuff. So
Did
that's
you see
number
the
one.
Wall Street Journal report yesterday?
I did.
Yeah,
exactly.
Scary. Yeah,
very scary. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, you're getting bullying. Cyberbullying bullying's been around forever. Kids are mean, and it's a really difficult thing growing up and all the things that happen to us. But when you take away the emotion of that face-to-face encounter and you physically see that you've harmed someone with your bullying, that goes away with the screen, right? And people do this indiscriminately. They do it anonymously. So in the case of someone you're going to interview soon, Kristen Bride, her son Carson was anonymously cyberbullied ad nauseum and took his own life because of that.
Right.
So, and then there's worse. There's other examples too of things that happen here, including people being sextorted, people being lulled into situations that are really, really awful, and trafficking, and including in that. So there's, it could go a lot further, sadly, but that's sort of the sort of spectrum.
Yeah, and let's touch on the sextortion. I know rates have been going way, way up, specifically and especially on Snapchat, but across the board. So, excuse me. Yesterday, I interviewed Bill Brady, who's the CEO of a company called TrueMe, and they have kid-safe phones. So you've heard of like TrueMe, Bark, Pinwheel.
Okay.
And so we talked about the rates of sextortion. And for listeners, sextortion is when a person is coerced into sending a nude photo online and then asked for money, or the nude photo will be shared with the victim's followers. And I post about this on Instagram, and people are like, they'll never share it. I hear from literal people that have experienced this, and it gets shared. People that have gotten their college, lost college opportunities over this, and then also died by suicide because of these situations. And the rates of sextortion are soaring. So I was talking with Bill at TrueMe, and he was telling me about they have the AI functionality with their TrueMe phones to recognize a nude photo that's trying to be sent, and to remove it so they don't let it send. And I wasn't aware of this functionality, and I asked him, like, then why won't Meta or Snap use this same AI functionality to stop the nude photos from going back and forth? Their community guidelines clearly state that nudity is not allowed. So if the technology exists to disallow it, why don't they invest in it? And I just wonder what your thoughts are on this generally, and generally, like, why big tech doesn't seem to give a shit about investing in protecting our kids.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the wonderful to hear that his technology can do that, and that's part of baked into the systems, because all of this is about design, right? All of this, the challenges we face come back to design and this product that is created to keep your eyeballs glued to it as long as possible. And that's the other part about the broader harms to kids, right? Is like the reason why all that stuff that we talked about before in a nutshell, in a small microcosm, is bad, but it's the endless scroll, the ad nauseum way in which people spend time on here, because it's addictive, because they're forced is the wrong word, but because they are pushed to do that by the design features of the technology. So to answer your question, why would they not do that? I can't say specifically why Meta, Snap, and others would not use that if they had the ability to. All I can say is that what's clear from the recent whistleblower, from Frances Haugen's testimony a couple years ago, from all the details we find leaking out from the attorneys general lawsuits, et cetera, is that they always put profit above safety. They always put their shareholders and their profits above the health of our kids. That is the bottom line. So I'm not going to speak to this specifically and understand why or what they have available to stop that from being shared. But my guess is that wherever friction is created in the system, wherever there's anything that causes you to have to stop and pause to instead of an instant share or instant repost, they're not going to prioritize that. That's sort of the best way I can answer that. It's never going to be the priority.
Yeah.
And
until we can regulate and force them to make that a priority.
Until it is, because here at the end of the day, it's like this. So literally, Mark Zuckerberg has a fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders to put profits above all else. That is literally in his like legal requirements under the as a CEO of a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
Until the equation is flipped, and we say as society there will be penalties if you break these rules and these laws, such that the penalties will hurt your company way more than it will help you to make that little extra margin of profit. They won't change their behaviors. The patterns won't shift. You're seeing now in Europe, the patterns are starting to evolve because of the Digital Services Act that was passed there, and how that is going to change things in Europe. It's just beginning to be implemented. So we're seeing some positive results, but that's the bottom line here. So we're never going to see those real changes and refocus the priorities unless they're forced to.
Right. Because, what I try to do is educate parents about these risks, and that we already talked about. And as a parent myself, I learned these risks, and I think I'm not letting my kids on there until it's way safer for them. And I'm also going to monitor my own use and use it for good and for business only. But so many parents are not making that decision, whether they don't know the risks or they know them and they don't care or prioritize those risks or think that it could happen to them. And so I think it does come down to regulation. And so tell me about what solutions you're working towards on behalf of the Council for Responsible Social Media.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll just, one point to that is that we as parents, we know that our kids are the first and foremost our responsibility, and it's our job to protect them. That's like, I literally said to my daughter the other day, she was trying to do something that, something she shouldn't do. And I said, it's daddy's responsibility to make sure you're safe. That's why we can't do this. That is the first thing we have to do when we wake up in the morning, Nikki, right? So, but these products are created in such a way that the design is baked in that makes it so much harder. So parents, yes, it is our responsibility to do that first and foremost, but we need help. We need some support, and we need the system to be reoriented where the technology is not so harmful. And we need our government to step up to actually answer that call. And to that end, what solutions are we working on? So with respect to kids, let me actually just take a step back before I go into specific bills and say, the Council for Responsible Social Media, a bipartisan group of leaders, as you noted, came together with this broader imperative to reform the tech sector. First and foremost, thinking about the impacts on democracy, but where we really, as we analyzed it more deeply, we came onto this sort of this focus on three to four core areas of work. Number one is the impact on our kids, the impact and implications for our kids, not just for themselves, but for the sake of our democracy as well. Secondly, the implications on U.S. national security and the ways in which foreign actors, terrorist organizations, and other bad actors are exploiting these platforms for their own ends. And beyond that is the implication for our democracy and the ways in which this undermines the core pillars of all the things that we care about as Americans and what we want to see for our system. And how do you do all that? Like, how do you fix all that? So it's such a big problem, and the thing is such an embedded thing in society. So we're focused on a few different pieces of legislation around, and mostly in Washington, but also around the country. The first one, and for kids and for your listeners, they'll care most about, is the Kids Online Safety Act. And that is there's been no federal legislation to sort of regulate the internet since the 1990s, which is
96, I think.
Yeah, it's just insane.
Crazy.
I mean, think about that. What was the internet like in 1996? What was the world that we live in 1996 compared to now? And the reason nothing's happened is for a reason, because these companies came, and at the beginning everyone thought they were wonderful. They're breaking norms. They're great tools for us to Google search, to connect with friends, to do all these things, for journalists to get on Twitter and be able to find information at a rapid clip. But quickly they've devolved into different things, and they still have a lot of great value, but the negatives are way outweighing the positives right now. So the Kids Online Safety Act is one that we're focused on. There's another bill that we're formally endorsed called the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, which is about the fact that there is no window into what's happening behind the screen, behind the curtain of the platforms. There's a giant black box. What is the algorithm? What are the different ways in which they're deciding to promote content and do things? How much bad content is being removed they share all kinds of statistics all the time and say, here's all the things we've done to help you. We removed this many terrible pieces of hate filled content or whatever, but they don't tell you what the denominator is out of how many.
And we've found that they're underestimating or underreporting that information to us based on the
Correct.
whistleblowers' information. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So basically, these are critical pieces of the puzzle. Making sure that kids are safe online is number one. Making sure we have a look behind the screen at what is actually going on. And having the platforms not grade their own homework, but having independent actors do that. And the PATA, the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, would take steps towards that.
Okay.
In addition, those are the only two bills the council has formally endorsed at this moment, but we're actively working on other issues and are looking into other places where we will put our energy in 2024 and beyond. We care a lot about data privacy. It's another critical piece of this puzzle. There's no comprehensive data privacy legislation in the United States. Right. We care about the regulatory framework and the ways in which the government has the ability to actually check and the balance of power of big tech. And currently, the FTC and other organizations are doing that, but we don't have a dedicated agency, for example, to focus on big tech and AI. And that is, the next terrain. Just one last anecdote to the point we were discussing earlier about sextortion.
Yeah.
So sextortion, terrible. It's so awful, all the things that are happening. And that's frequently based on a decision that someone makes, someone with a child with an underdeveloped brain, et cetera. Right. But with AI, with generative AI and other tools, what we're seeing now is that people can just take a photo of you off of Instagram that fully clothed and then create a fake nude and then do the same thing without you ever having made that terrible decision. So there's just so much more at stake because of the sort of scale of this and the exponential growth and speed of technology.
Yeah, and there's questions about it's technically not illegal to just create a nude photo that is not an actual nude photo. I spoke with Leah Plunkett, a Harvard professor who wrote a book called Sharenthood about this, and she said, that is very tricky. It's obviously illegal to share a nude photo of someone underage that is a true nude photo of them, but these high school boys that was reported in New Jersey taking photos of girls at their high school and removing the clothing and sharing them back and forth and snickering about it. It's difficult to know what to do about that because legislation is not caught up to that issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Done some research on COSA specifically. And I know when I look it up, there's some pushback and I hear things like limiting free speech. So what is the pushback and what should parents kind of keep in mind when looking up these bills?
So the first thing I would say here, let me tell you what's in it before we talk about what the pushback has been. So I mean, here again, nothing's been done since the 1990s, and we see all the harms that are happening online. What this does, think about other industries. When you buy a car, there's a duty of care that the car, that manufacturer is going to do certain things to make sure that you don't turn the key and on day one your car explodes, or that there's a Food and Drug Administration who's going to verify and make sure that that we don't just eat poisonous materials based at large because of the standards requirements. There is no duty of care around technology in the same way. So the most important piece of this legislation is the duty of care, which requires platforms to prevent or mitigate children from seeing the worst stuff, the absolute worst stuff that you and I were talking about before, the self-harm content, the eating disorder content, substance abuse. They're supposed to take steps to mitigate addictive features like the endless scroll, or stop allowing inappropriate advertisements to minors. There's plenty of examples of really, violent and sexual content being
on YouTube
ads,
Kids even.
On YouTube Kids.
Research. I know. I have a whole episode on YouTube Kids. Get me started.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it would make the safety features be the strongest by default, as you and I both know as parents. Like when you're trying to go into the app you're on your TV and you're like, okay, I want to turn off autoplay. Like I just tried to do this the other day, turn off autoplay on Disney Plus. And I went in there into the app on my TV and it was like, oh, you need to go into your computer and log into this. I'm like, yeah, or I probably could do it from my phone too, but I couldn't do it from the TV itself, right? So So they make it, all this stuff is by design
Hmm.
intentionally to make it harder for us to get off of them.
Yeah.
And in addition, COSA would allow kids to opt out of algorithmic recommendation systems, which are
Right.
arguably the most problematic elements of all of this.
Make it the most addictive, or one of the
Correct.
ways that it becomes so addictive. Yeah.
Correct. And also it's one of the ways in which some of the worst stuff gets boosted, right? That the all the stuff
Yeah.
we were talking about before.
Right.
So that's what's in there. That's what this would do. The only arguments against, number one, is there's a free speech sort of argument that people use anytime you want to see any tech reform pass, which is that
Okay.
anything passed against any sort of reform would
Hmm.
require the platforms to remove content, would make them have to go over and above to moderate content, which
Hmm.
would undermine the First Amendment. That is the first argument against it, and there's a lot of extreme, what I would call free speech expansionism, that
Hmm.
First Amendment expansionism that has sort of been baked into any argument against any tech reform bill. So that's the first argument people
Uh-huh.
make.
Yep.
The second argument people make is around the impact on LGBTQ communities, and this comes from a good place, but it's very misguided. And basically, it really came from opposition last year. There was a letter sent out around this issue, but the bottom line is that there were some concerns that this bill could be inadvertently used and weaponized against these communities.
Yeah.
Um,
Didn't
but
one of the
it's just
senators say something wrong a few months ago?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
But the statement was actually not in relation to the bill at all.
Okay. Okay.
They were
So
that
the
was they
headlines
were
were misleading.
yes, which is very common in the space.
Yeah. Okay.
The bottom line really is this: is that LGBTQ persons are some of the most vulnerable and harmed online.
Yes.
And cyberbullying, other things impact that community and other communities much worse than a lot of other places. And
Right.
so this bill would do a lot more to protect them than it would to harm them. And these arguments, which are touted by uh, some groups that are very closely aligned to tech platforms,
Hmm.
are really what we see is a constant tactic of throwing out things like this to try to obfuscate and really try to stop any sort of reform that's going to hit the tech platforms.
Yeah, because people will just jump on that bandwagon with that term, right? Um, is COSA have any age verification requirements?
So age verification, it's not in there. There's not
Okay.
age verification in the bill at this
Okay.
point.
Gotcha. Okay. So, what can parents do to support if they do the research on COSA or listen to this and decide they want to help support this bill going forward? What can they do?
There's two things. One is I would say go to passcosa.org, which is a
Okay.
website that with us and a bunch of coalition partners who are who are in support of this, and it's a broad coalition you'll see on there. So I'd say go to that and check out the information.
Hmm.
The second thing is call your senator. We need people to call their senators and say that they want them to pass and support this bill. We've
Okay.
got almost half of the U.S. Senate has endorsed this legislation,
Okay.
co-sponsored it, I should say.
Great.
And so it's so close. It needs a floor vote in the Senate. It will pass with, I would guess, 80 plus votes. We did some polling that came out 2 weeks ago. 86% of the electorate supports COSA.
Amazing.
86%.
And then how long does it take to enact after that? Does it take like a year?
I can't remember the specifics
Okay.
of that timeline, but first of all, it has to get through the Senate, then it has to get through the House.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
the next stage, and then the President Biden has called for it to be passed into law.
Okay.
Um, and so I can't remember the exact timeline, but usually there's a some sort of window before it's
Okay.
not sort of enacted on day one kind of thing.
Right. So in the meantime, we are where we are and the risks are huge. And so in the meantime, would you, if your children were of age to be using social media, kind of delay that decision and keep them off of social media until it is reasonably safer and there's some more regulation?
I would, yeah. So I talked to someone recently who's a senior, one of the chief like science officers at one of the big medical associations, and I will
Hmm.
say that this person, I asked them what they did with their kids, and this is a
Hmm.
person who talks about the brain function and how we're impacted in the ways in which this technology really has impacted our development physically as well
Yeah,
as
changing the brain.
emotionally.
too. Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this person told me that no social media for their kids, none. And that's, you know, my kids are 2 and 3 months. So I don't have to make this call quite yet for them.
Right.
But for the way I feel right now is if my daughters were 13 and 15, I would say absolutely not. And to this, because I just could not feel like I was doing my primary duty and responsibility as a father if I were to allow them on there.
Yeah, I agree. My kids are 8 and under, and so I have some time as well, but I'm on the same page. I recently messaged Arturo Behar, the Meta whistleblower, and asked him straightforward if his daughter wasn't already on Instagram, would he allow his teenage daughter to use Instagram? And he said, not, not. It's not safe for kids aged 13 to 15 at a minimum, based on what they get exposed to, the people and content that they get exposed to. So 15 at a minimum. And really, the more leaders in this space and experts that I talk to are waiting. I've also talked to parents who waited and didn't give it to their kids till their kids were 18. And then when their kids got on at 18, they kind of went crazy with it. So I think you have to be communicating about the risks when you make this decision. Make sure your kids understand why, and make sure your kids are prepared for how they're going to use it as an adult, right? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I said, I feel what I said before. I stand by that statement that at this moment, the way this technology is, I would have to say no.
Right.
But the point you made is exactly right. That once they, you know, go off to college or go off to work or leave your home, and you're not there to have that same level of dialogue, it's a different ballgame. And I have an example, one of my best friends from graduate school, when he went off to college, his parents basically didn't let him have sugar. And he goes off his first year of college and gets like 8 cavities. Yeah. So that's real. And I would just say that you have to have these conversations. You have to be thoughtfully talking. You can't just say no, period. You have to help them understand your reasoning.
Yeah.
Share with them data. Someone I know talks about how they go into apps and they show their kids what the app is actually doing. Hey, this benign weather app, what do you think this app does? Oh, it just tells me what the weather is. Well, yeah, it does that. But what else is it doing? It's tracking your data. It's tracking your location. It's sharing the information of your data across apps, and it's tracking all of that so that it can sell it to other people, so they can use that and monetize it. And similarly,
go ahead.
I say similarly with all the stuff that you and I are talking about today, all these terrible things that are showing up in people's feeds, you need to talk through why that is. But at the end of the day, this quote I heard about, the constant argument is your kids are going to be ostracized if you don't let them on.
Right.
And what I've heard is there's no data to suggest that the harm, like there is an actual quantitative harm to those kids that are being left off, as where the data is very clear that kids who are on these platforms are more depressed, are more likely to harm themselves, and are much more vulnerable than their peers.
Right. So what's more important, that your kid might feel ostracized or that they are healthy mentally and physically? And I hear time and time again, kids that are 18, 20 saying to their parents, thank you for keeping me away from that, because I see how it's affected my friends. And I'm grateful to you for limiting that for me or making that decision for me. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I know that individual state laws are being implemented in this space. Like Utah became the first state to enact laws limiting how children can use social media, so requiring age verification. Other states are following suit. And it feels like the pressure is really heating up on Meta, particularly with dozens of states suing Meta and the new whistleblower, and the latest Wall Street Journal report finding that Meta was pushing content sexualizing children and advertising within this content. So do you feel like we're heading in the right direction with regulating big tech? Do you feel like we're almost there?
Yeah. I said to someone the other day, I really feel like we're in the middle of a moment that we will remember historically as like the beginning of the breaking of this dam. And look back in history and other big industries, the trust busting era and other times where it felt like things would never change, but they eventually did. And I do believe
Hmm.
we are really at the forefront of that moment. As you
Yeah.
noted, 42 attorneys general,
Right.
42 suing Meta,
Yep.
alleging that Facebook and Instagram are addictive and harming kids. They're
Yep.
using creative methods to sue them. There's also nearly 200, I think it may be over 200 now, school
Hmm.
districts around the country have joined forces to sue multiple platforms, including Facebook or including
Oh, I didn't know
Instagram.
about that. Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, so this is there, and they're also trying to use creative methods. They're not just saying it's harmful content. They're saying it's costing them money. It's costing these school districts dollars because they have to pay for additional resources to support these kids' mental health issues.
Right.
Um, so yes, I think we were in a moment, but do not be fooled that it will be easy,
Right.
because these platforms have so much money, so much power, and for decades basically they got to operate with impunity because people just saw the upside and didn't see the downside. And now we're in this really unique moment where that is flipped. And as I noted, something like 87% is in favor, 86% is in favor of COSA, but 87% of the electorate is really believes it's important for Congress to take action to combat the harms caused by social
Yeah.
media platforms. So what else in the country, what other issue in this polarized world has the support of 86% of Trump voters and 88% of Biden voters? Like nothing.
Right. And
So
yet is taking forever to pass anything.
that is
Shows where
partially
the
due to
power is.
the power is there. It's the system's hard to get through. It's much easier to kill bills than it is to create them.
Hmm.
But the public opinion is so strongly in favor of reform that I believe something will happen in the next years, and it's going to be a piece by piece process. And COSA, for example, will not solve the problem, will not fix everything. It will do a lot of really good stuff for our kids and for
Yeah.
our country, but it goes nowhere near far enough.
Right. And for parents who are listening, does it make a difference for us to be limiting our children's social media use? So just simply in the number of users going down in this younger age group, does that make a difference?
Uh, in terms of how it's going to impact
Just
the
helping the
regular,
tide go in the right direction, right? Just I
yeah.
don't know. Like it can feel like what can we really do? And yes, we can, call our state senators and support legislation and make those decisions within our family that are safer.
But
But
yeah, yeah. So what I would say is a couple things. One is we have to live in the reality that is right now, and we have
yeah,
to do the best we can as parents right now to protect our families.
yeah,
So that is, number one about the decisions you should make as a parent in this individual moment.
yeah.
As you think about something bigger in reform, I think it is very easy to think you're such a small fish in a very big pond of so many, the big tech and all the money they have.
Hmm.
And there's truth in that, of course, but no, every single one of you listening, every single person out there has power, has agency to do something, and it can be
Hmm.
as little as calling your senator. It can be much bigger than that. You can organize your communities around this issue, around this bill, around many things. So there's lots of ways and lots of opportunities to get plugged in and involved
Yeah,
to support. So I think that to answer your specific question, should you pull your kids off just for the bigger fight? I think that's a personal choice. I think if everyone goes off, then yes, like we're going to see a very
yeah,
different scenario. But you can
yeah.
only really demand change through your actions, and so that is one action that could be positive for sure.
Okay. And you mentioned schools, and I wanted to talk about a super hot topic, which is phone bans in schools. And I know you worked for the California Chartered Schools Association, and just wondering, as an expert in the space, what your opinion is. So, 80% of US schools have prohibited non academic use of phones during school hours, and 1 in 4 countries have laws or policies banning phones in schools. I posted about this on Instagram. It's like got 3.5 million views every day, like hundreds of thousands more views and comments. And people have very strong opinions on all sides, mostly in favor, but lots of parents share things like, that's my property. You're not going to touch my kid's phone, or I need to get a hold of my kid at any time if there's an emergency, and all these things. So I wonder where you're at with phone use in schools, if you have any opinion on that topic.
Yeah, it's not something we're working on
Yeah.
the council, just
Yeah.
to be clear, but I personally do have a lot of thoughts about it, and
Okay.
I'd say that I'm a fan of anything that's going to help our kids learn.
Hmm.
And then the distraction of these devices is such that it's a big problem for their education. That's very clear from all the evidence. Uh, and it's hard to implement. There's there's logistical and legit
Yes.
challenges of how do you do this? How do you execute it? A lot of smart people at the school districts can come up with ways to do that, I'm sure.
Yep.
So I'm generally in favor of it. I think there's probably even but that's not going to fix the problem. You know, at the end of the day,
Hmm.
it's not gonna fix the overarching problem. It's the deeper design decisions about how these platforms work that we've talked about already that are really the root of the problem.
Yeah.
Um, that said, I have a neighbor across the street who's got several teenagers, and we love to talk about soccer, which we're all big fans of. And they'll tell me, "Oh, I was at school yesterday, and I watched the whole match during my class." And I was like, "Wait, what?" Yeah, I mean, great that you got to see your team play, but that's horrible for your education. You spent an hour and a half in class watching something on your phone. Your teacher didn't clue
Hmm.
into that.
Yeah. Yes, I hear that all the time at my children's school. Excuse me. They have iPads in their classes starting in kindergarten, and these iPads have Safari internet access because I've talked to the district about it. It's very, very difficult to remove that from the iPad entirely. And you can go on YouTube.com, adult YouTube. You can go on NFL.com, and there's kids watching football games in class. Um, so it's a struggle in implementation that the phones aren't banned. Well, these are iPads that are given to the kids, but phones are also not banned. So um, it's a touchy subject. And I mean, I've had news stations reach out to me just based on this viral post that I had, um, and teachers second guessing the Wall Street Journal reporting that. Well, so the school district that I reported on in Florida reports less bullying, more engagement, and different benefits of it. But there's teachers in the district and parents in the district saying it's not working well. Actually, the kids are getting access to the phone, so it's a touchy subject. And
It's it's tough, and I get a lot of the concerns parents would have at the end of the
yeah,
day. When I was in school, I think you and I are probably similar-ish age. So
yep, yep,
when we were in school, didn't have a cell phone. If
yeah,
my parent really needed me at school, they could call the school. The school would find
yeah,
me very quickly. It was
right.
fine, and we survived. So I think there's this goes into the system of hyper parenting and all the things that helicopter
Hmm.
parenting, all the stuff that we have become accustomed to, and the challenges that come with that. So I think parents have to let go a
Yeah,
little bit too.
yeah. And I talk about helicopter parenting on an episode that launched this week called The Teenage Brain Explained with Nicola Morgan, who's the teenage brain woman. And she talks about um, preferring safety net parenting. And she talks about, just being their safety net, not doing things for them, um, but allowing them to fall in a safe way. So I encourage listeners to listen to that episode. I would love to also talk a little bit about your thoughts on sharenting. So you may have heard of this term. So this is coined for adults who share their children's information, image online. Doesn't have to be on social media, but anywhere online. So personally, I stopped posting my kids online due to the digital privacy risks nearly 4 years ago. And it was especially interesting to learn that these big tech executives largely do not post their own children on social media. Um, so I wonder, after all your work and research, like what approach you are taking to sharing your kids online, and how you feel about that topic of sharenting.
Yeah, very personal decision, and it's
Yep.
so tough for people because I think when you think about what the good can be and is on social media, you think about, oh, I love seeing the update about my friend and their life.
Yeah.
It's this person I went to college with or high school with that I haven't seen in years,
Yeah.
but I love to get that little glimmer of what's going on in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that the kid is first among that, right?
Yeah.
I personally have chosen to basically not post at all. My
Mm-hmm.
daughters.
Mm-hmm.
They're 2.5 and 3 months, as I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and I posted, I believe, uh, when my eldest daughter was born, I did a post with her photo and announcing the birth. I have not done that yet for my youngest daughter. I think I will, because otherwise one day she might look back at my feed and see that I posted about her big sister, not about her, and I'll be in big
Yeah.
trouble. But I feel like right now that's it for me. Maybe an occasional one here and there, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to be doing it. And I'm not judging people who do it
Right. No, no.
because
Yeah. Judgment free zone for sure. It's the
no,
norm. Most people do it.
it is, but I also know way more than the average person about this stuff, right? And the
Yes.
harms that it can cause.
Yep.
And I think if more people understood and pulled back the veil of understanding what was going on with all these images, with all the data, they would maybe think twice about it as well. But for me, it's at this point, it's a choice that we're not posting basically anything about our daughters.
Yeah. And, I did announce my first two on social media. And I did not announce my third. And there's people that don't even know she exists, which is totally fine. If you are close enough with me, we are texting, or I'll share something. I'll share photos with you via text, or we have a family shared album on our iPhones that family can see updates there. So there's plenty of other options. It's been helpful to share stories of when things went wrong with sharing kids online, sharing a specific story of a mom who was sharing her daughters, and the daughter's photos got stolen and ended up on child sexual abuse websites. And that also has gotten almost 1 million views, and so many women sharing it, mostly women, some, not a lot of dads, mostly moms, sharing it and saying like, this is why I don't post my kids online, or now I won't post my kids online, asking me, what do I do now? I don't want to post them anymore, and I actually don't want them on here. Should I go through and delete everything? So I think there is a wave of people kind of better understanding the risks. Again, it's not a judgment. If you understand the risks and you decide that that's okay with you, like you want to move forward with posting, that's fine too. It's just that I think the important thing is getting the risks in front. When it comes to social media and posting kids and all of this, I think it's all about understanding the risks of all of it and then being intentional with your decisions, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And getting the information, learning, and grappling with it with intentionality, I think really is the point. So
Yeah.
going with clear eyes about what that could mean.
Yeah. And so what's your personal approach to using social media in adulthood? Like, are you using LinkedIn for business, or what are you kind of doing? I'm using just LinkedIn and Instagram solely to promote this podcast, and there's no crossover really between my personal life and online activities. So where are you at with that?
Yeah, so I have a LinkedIn account and that I rarely post to. I think I think people would tell me I probably should post more on there for purposes of helping support our work. But I do a limited amount there.
Yeah.
I still technically have a Facebook account. I basically never go on there anymore.
Yeah, I think that's mostly the case with most people.
Yeah, and there's things about that I miss, right? Like I definitely miss people's birthdays, and I definitely miss seeing some of those photos, but the harms outweigh the upside for now.
Yeah.
And then I have an Instagram account and that I go on less. I have a like very, very limited amount of time on there too. I mostly go on there because my wife sends me messages that are from the good stuff, like parenting, parenting gurus who are like telling us how to make sure that our kids are eating right and great examples of thoughtful parenting and approaches. There's so many good things like that on there. That's the issue, is there is a lot of that great content.
Yeah.
So I go on, she's on there more than I am, and I go on there to read mostly her messages and to see some of that, but I spend less than 10 minutes a day on anything, like very, very limited.
And I think that's a good point too. What I've said before is, if you're using your social media platform for good, then I think you're in the clear. Like if we all just used the platforms for good, but the problem is there's so many bad people in the world, and I've been exposed to a lot of these bad people through my research around tech and social media use, and it can be scary and sad. For example, most of the people who get photos stolen from their social media profiles, children's photos, are stolen by people they know that are already within their private profile followers. So there's scary stuff like that we don't like to think about, and I don't like to talk about, but it's just the truth. So
and the point you made there is, even if everyone in the world just did nothing but good on social media as it currently exists,
right,
that would only reduce some of the issues, because
again,
you have to remember, it's the design features of the platform that are the problem.
Right.
And so even if we all went there and just did good, just uplifted positive content, etc., and there weren't any predators and other, explicit individuals who were doing the harming stuff
Mhm.
intentionally,
Mhm.
it's still going to do so much of the negative stuff it's doing to our society, our democracy. It's going to polarize us because of the way the algorithms work and push up extreme content in order to make us stay on the site, keep our eyeballs focused on the platforms.
Yeah.
So yeah, that it's tough. It's so hard because it's ubiquitous in society, and you feel like you're missing out. I've heard examples of people say, I missed someone's death, and I wasn't
Yeah.
able to respond to this friend because they assumed that I would do it. So I saw them 2 months later, and they were baffled that I didn't know that their mom had passed away. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I get it, but
Yeah. I'm
it's
cool with that. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
there's got to be, we can't have social media being our number one primary form of communication. And for young people, it is. And so, in our generation, we're lucky enough to grow up in a time where that wasn't, and we can still keep those relationships up and on different platforms and in person. So
yep,
hopefully with
absolutely.
some more regulation and some shifts in mindset, we can get back to having healthier relationships and experiences online.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a world that exists in which these platforms enable us to connect deeply and take that offline, right? Like they help
Yeah,
facilitate offline interactions in really
right.
healthy ways, bringing communities together. There's things like um, GoFundMe pages. There's all kinds of beautiful things that have happened because of social media.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, again, the harms so heavily outweigh the positives right now that we have
Yeah,
to flip the equation, or it's just not worth it
yeah.
to bring together this really eclectic, amazing group of people, former leaders from government, former leaders from Congress, former leaders from all across sectors, whistleblowers like Frances Haugen, moms like Kristen Bride who've lost
Mm.
their children to this. And we're trying to find a way to really make reforms and cause positive change in this world and through the sector. And so I would just say that we'd love for you folks to check us out and follow Issue One on my organization does a lot of platform stuff because we need to as an organization to do our work well. So you can
Mm-hmm.
follow Issue One
Yeah.
and the Council for Responsible Social Media. And again, would love people to go check out passcosa.org. It's a really important opportunity for parents to look into this important topic and figure out ways to support. But I think that's it. Grateful
Okay.
for the work you're doing, Nikki, and for the opportunity to come on and talk to you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Alex, for making the time to chat today. You're doing so much good for the world and for our kids' well-being. So thank you. And to the listeners, thank you for joining us here at Scrolling to Death and for being part of this conversation. There's nothing more important than the mental health and physical health of our children. So I'll be here to support you through this time, and I will catch you next time. Thank you for listening.